we are delighted to take part in Cork Harbour Festival. And this is an especially important talk about marine protected areas and the impact of communities on the conservation and restoration of seas. We're very lucky to have Russell Cheshire here with us from the community of Arran Seabed Trust at this webinar. So thank you, Russell, very much for joining us today. So just a very quick introduction. Coast is a community-led organisation that's had a huge difference to the conservation and restoration of the seas around Arran and the Clyde for the past 25 years. They have a wide range of achievements under their belt. Two specific ones is they've actually proposed and achieved protection in 2008 for the community-led no-take zone in Lamlash Bay. And in 2016, the South Arran Marine Protected Area extended this area to nearly 300 square kilometres to exclude scallop dredging, but also to allow for other potentially more sustainable fishing methods in various zones. And in 2018, they opened the Coast Discovery Centre, Scotland's first MPA visitor centre. So with this webinar, Russell will show through real cases that small communities with the right amount of valid evidence and determination can persuade governments to make change, give long-term benefits for the environment and all that rely on it for livelihood and leisure. Russell has been involved with Coast as a volunteer, committee member and trustee. He was the chair for 3 years and has seen many changes in those years. He is currently living on the Isle of, sorry if I don't get this right, Gill, south of Oban, where he skippers wildlife tour boats. So this talk is about their experiences and will hopefully provide us food for thought and ways that we can work together. So before Russell starts, I just also want to explain that please, if you have any questions as he is speaking, there is a Q&A box at the bottom. So please do type in your questions and we will address them at the end. So in the meantime, I have great pleasure in introducing Russell and welcome to the webinar. Thank you, Russell.
Thanks, Jill, for that lovely introduction. That's brilliant. Great. Right. I need to share my screen, and if I go, there we go. So that's one, that's just me. So thank you. As Jill said, yes, I've been with Coast for quite a while now, over 12 years. And I'm just going to run through a little introduction of the sort of things we've done. This is where we are. Arran is a large island, west coast of Scotland. It's the largest island in the Firth of Clyde, southwest of Glasgow. The Firth of Clyde is Britain's largest inland sea, and it was once home to a very productive fishery for herring, cod, haddock, ling, many other valuable species of fish. But during the late 20th century, catches declined to such an extent that there are no longer quotas for whitefish in the Firth of Clyde. And the local fishers actually rely on langoustine, Norway lobster, prawns to make a living for the large extent, with a few small percentages from lobster, crab and scallop making up the total. In the 90s, these two guys, Howard Wood and Don McNeish, local scuba divers, realised the extent of the damage being done to the seabed and therefore to the creatures and the plants down there by intensive inshore trawling and dredging. Don visited family and friends in New Zealand, and while he was out there, he visited some of their marine reserves and was inspired by the work of Bill Ballantyne, the late Bill Ballantyne, unfortunately. And when he came back, he discussed all this with Howard. They determined that the decline should be stopped and reversed to allow the sea to restore itself to its former state of health and abundance. So they wrote to everybody and showed films. hoping that they would make a difference. They realised quite quickly that two middle-aged guys can't change the world by themselves, so they had to get more support from the local community. Wrote to the local newspaper, they went to various society meetings, they spoke to people in the shops and the bars, and generally managed to get the local community fired up. And in 1995, the Community of Arran Seabed Trust was formed, a very small sort of way to start with. Early meetings being held in each other's houses, so we had to bring our own biscuits and tea and coffee and stuff like that. And more people contacted MPs, MSPs, councillors about the issues relating to the problem with the sea. And the answer usually came back from the politicians that they couldn't see a problem because they listened to the fishing industry, and the fishing industry says there's no problem. The fishing industry had diversified, well, done the opposite of diversifying. They'd moved from one species to another, and they'd moved down the food web. So they'd started off with big fish, and now they were guddling around in the mud at the bottom of the Firth of Clyde looking for prawns. So we had to find a way to demonstrate to the politicians that there was really a problem. And we did this by using historical records and science. And we were able to show when and why the fishery had collapsed. And we used information from Ruth Thurston and Callum Roberts from the University of York. They'd produced a paper on the meltdown, the ecological meltdown of the Firth of Clyde. These three charts show what's happened. The nice colourful one at the top shows the decline in roundfish, whitefish, cod, haddock, etc. over time, and the increase, the black line, in the catches of prawns, nephrops. The causes can be identified using the small chart in the bottom left-hand corner. In the 1960s, the ban on trawling in the Firth of Clyde was removed, and the catch of fish went up because the machinery was more efficient. Over time, the catches fell, and then in 1984, the 3-mile limit on trawling around the edge, nobody could trawl with big trawlers within 3 miles of the shore, was removed. In 1985, the catch shot up, as you can see from that chart, and then by the end of the 20th century, the fishery had all but collapsed. And at the same time, the fishers were switching from large trawl nets to catch fish to smaller, finer mesh nets to catch prawns at the bottom of the sea. And this is the sort of thing that was left after a dredging vessel has passed through. I want to try and show you a little video if I can, but I'm going to have to stop the slideshow a moment and then see if I can find the video again. Here we go. It's just a short video, about 3 minutes. Hopefully, you'll all be able to see this.
Arran is an island of distinct seasonal variation, experiencing conditions ranging from blissful summers to harsh and stormy winters. Yet despite this, fishing remains a year-round activity. From the sustainable use of creel and diving for scallops, to the heavy industry of trawlers and dredgers, the seas around Arran are rarely quiet. Dredging can be a profitable pursuit for a few, but what is the true cost of dredging? The waters around Arran, within memory, have hosted a wide range of species of both recreational and commercial importance. To allow recovery of a complex and healthy marine environment, we need protection from destructive fishing methods such as dredging. Here we can see the true cost of dredging. This footage was recorded in the now designated Marine Protected Area. After only a few passes of a scallop dredger, the sea floor is transformed into an underwater desert. Ask yourself, is scallop dredging inshore waters a sustainable activity? What are the true costs of allowing this to continue? Surely there is more value to both our generation and future generations in allowing biodiversity recovery.
I hope that worked all right. Let's go back to the slideshow. There we go. So the commercial fishing community were initially supportive of our proposal for a no-take zone, as shown on this little picture, at the north end of Holy Isle and Lumlash Bay, and a community marine protected area for the rest of the bay. And then they decided that having a marine protected area as well as a no-take zone was far too much, and the no-take zone would be sufficient to regenerate the entire Firth of Clyde fishery. This is just 1 square mile out of several thousand square miles that make up the Firth of Clyde. Armed with all our information and loads of determination, Arran's community could now support its arguments, and in 2008, 13 years after Coast was formed, 18 years after Howard and Don first decided to take action, Lumlash Bay no-take zone, Scotland's first and only the UK's second no-take zone, were put into effect by Act of Parliament. So as I say, it's just 2.67 square kilometres, 1 square mile. The no-take zone has been recognised now as a world-class example of how nature can and will restore the environment following long-term damage by mankind. And it's not just our word for it. The whole no-take zone has been surveyed by students from the University of York, the University of Glasgow, Strathclyde University, all sorts of people, even the Scottish government agencies, Marine Scotland and Scottish Natural Heritage as it was then, it's now Nature Scot, at that time invested it. We received funding to take on staff, and we were able to influence decision makers at senior levels in government, and the South Arran Marine Protected Area that Gill spoke of earlier came into being in 2014. It was designated in 2014, but wasn't actually implemented for another 2 years, mainly because of opposition, as you can see from here, from the fishing industry, who were quite happy with their prawn fishery. So on the day of the decision in Holyrood, we went along, and some fishermen from the Firth of Clyde fishery went along, and it got quite a bit interesting, shall we say, at times. The orange smoke is a flare canister that one of the fishers decided they'd let off next to us. Unfortunately, I don't think he was a brilliant skipper of a boat, because he forgot which way the wind was blowing, and it covered all of his guys. There we are. And this is what the South Arran Marine Protected Area now looks like. You've got the small hatched area in the top right-hand corner of the map. That's the original no-take zone. So you can see how much more of the water around Arran is protected from heavy fishing industries. In nowhere in that area is scallop dredging permitted. This is the method where, as we saw in the little film, huge metal frames with teeth are dragged across the seabed to lift the catch. And in the diagonally marked area, no trawling for prawns is permitted. It's allowed in the outside edges because that's deeper water in muddy sediment in the Firth of Clyde, and the government considered that any benefit by protecting that would be extremely marginal. Although, well, some of us would disagree with that slightly, shall we say. So, is it making any difference? What we have seen is an increase in diversity all through the marine protected area in the no-take zone. There's more seaweed variety down there now, and more mollusks and other invertebrates and vertebrates, and the cover of living organisms on the seabed in the no-take zone is almost twice that of nearby areas. No-take zone produces as many scallops as an area 20 times its size outside. Lobster in the no-take zone are 4 times more numerous, are larger, and therefore more productive. Young haddock and cod are now regularly seen in the area. It is hoped that some of those species will spread out from the no-take zone into the marine protected area. Because there's no bottom dragging activity in large proportion of that, that then gives these creatures a chance to grow and breed in their own turn. So in the South Arran MPA, studies have shown that the overall density of small marine species increased by 80%, both animal and vegetable, and newly returned species are being seen by divers. In 2020, a previously unknown flame shell bed. This is it's a strange little shellfish with fiery tentacles that stick out. These things form mats and link together with things called byssal threads. It's a sort of sticky, gooey substance. And they form mats on the seabed, and other creatures come and live in there as well. And it actually helps to hold the seabed together in much the same way as an oyster bed might. We don't know for definite how large the flame shell bed is. It's not incredibly dense. It's very sparse at the moment, but we think it may cover an area of something like 10,000 square meters at the moment. We're not quite sure yet. This is just an example of what can happen. On the left, a dredged area in 2014, and on the right, exactly the same area 4 years later. So nobody has intervened in that time to introduce new species or old species in there. The sea, nature, has done this itself, which is absolutely fantastic. Is the community of Arran still backing us? Well, in a survey compiled in December 2020, 87% felt that Coast is effective in standing up for the rights of Arran's residents with regard to their coastal waters. 92% said our national and international standing benefited the island's economy, and 95% of respondents thought Coast had made a positive contribution to the sea's health. This kind of information is vital to persuading politicians that your organisation speaks for a large number of the electorate. And if it's getting close to an election, candidates will be taking this into consideration. The last two, well, these photographs show the level of support from the Arran community for clean, healthy, productive seas. What happened was that a large salmon producing company put forward plans to install a 5,000 ton production ton fish farm facility off Arran's uninhabited and undeveloped northeast coast, a place called Millstone Point. They wanted to put 20 cages in the water there and a huge feed tower, plus all the ancillary bits and pieces. The problem with the open cage fish farms are manifold, and it ranges from the source of the feed for the fish, which can be brought in from all over the world, to the immediate impact in the area, not just the visual intrusion or the disturbance from sound, but also the waste from the fish falls through the cages and smothers the seabed, wiping out existing wildlife. They use all sorts of awful chemicals, and I gather that just today the European Union, God bless it, has banned the use of neonicotinoid insecticides by the salmon industry because of the risks involved to all the other creatures in the sea. I won't go into the Brexit thing, but it's something. I was in Dublin in 2016 at a large conference there, and I actually apologized to everybody, but there we go. So because of this number of people who gathered together at short notice on a lovely Sunday afternoon, they gave their own time up. There are over 200 people ranging in age from babes in arms to octogenarians, and they walked all along the shore to the site and back again to demonstrate their feelings on the matter. In the bottom picture, you can actually see a couple of boats out to sea, and some of the guys actually sail their yachts and motorboats around there, which was brilliant. And several kayakers as well came along. And because of that level of support or opposition to this development plan, the local planning authority, North Ayrshire Council, rejected the plans. Unfortunately, the salmon company has the right of appeal, and they have taken it to appeal. So we now have to go through this all over again. But because of the way the decision went the first time, we are optimistic that it will again be rejected. Fingers crossed. Coast activities, of course, a huge wave of activity around Scotland and elsewhere. Other communities saw what we were doing and the way we went about it, and came to us looking for advice and guidance on how they should deal with similar issues in their neighbourhoods. And it was absolutely brilliant that they did this. We were delighted that there was so much interest, so much enthusiasm. Unfortunately, the level of information being requested was such that we couldn't actually do what we wanted to do. We were too busy helping other people. So with the help of Fauna and Flora International, another organisation called Coastal Communities Network was developed, and they act as a sort of clearinghouse for all the communities. And that is an absolutely brilliant organisation. There are now nearly 20 other small organisations like Coast all round the edges of Scotland, mostly on the west coast where the real issues are seen, and several appearing on the east coast now, which is absolutely fantastic. We also have another coalition called Our Seas, and that group has over 100 Scottish organisations, not just charities or ecological organisations. It has people who own fishing boats in there who are concerned about what's happening with the sea. It has tourism businesses who are concerned. It has fish and chip shop people in there. And they also bring people together and share information. And one of the things they're pushing at the moment is a film called The Limit, and that emphasizes the need to reinstate a spatial limit not dissimilar to the 3-mile limit that you may remember I said was removed in 1984, so that the inshore waters where most of the nursery grounds for fish are can be protected from trawling and dredging. Now, obviously, there are certain parts of the fishing industry for whom this is an absolute anathema. They claim they have the absolute right to dredge and trawl right up to the beach if they so wish. Unfortunately, it may provide them with a short-term living, but it's destroying Scotland's biodiversity, it's destroying Scotland's marine economy, and it's taking away the livelihoods of our children and grandchildren, and also the children and grandchildren of the fishermen. So we need to do something to turn this round to protect Scotland's seas, and this is what this is all about. So if you look for a film called The Limit on YouTube, that will, I think, explain in far more detail what I've just been talking about. It's only a short film, but please look for that on YouTube. Now, I'd like, if possible, to show you another little film. It's only 4 minutes long, and it's called Day for Night. And it's a little video that we put together, which pretty much summarizes what I've been talking about, and also gets comments from some people around the community.
It all started because it was fairly obvious to both sea anglers and divers that the fish and the kind of marine environment that we had 30, 40 years ago was getting poorer and poorer every year. There were a lot of locals not happy about it. In the end, someone had to do something. And so we set up Coast just over 20 years ago to try and trial a marine reserve in Scotland.
I've been coming here since I was that height, and I fished out in the bay there with my parents since the age of 6, so I've seen the changes.
Most of this was caused by changes in fisheries legislation in 1984, when they allowed trawlers to come right to the shore. Up until that point, they'd not been allowed in within 3 miles.
Scallop dredging has a detrimental effect in places, and it's plain to see it, you know, the way the fish disappear.
The government really only listened to the large commercial fishing lobby. They were not interested in sea anglers, they were not interested in communities.
Originally, our aim was just to have the Lamnash Bay as a marine protected area and have a small no-take zone in it. But I mean, now we have managed to achieve far more, and we've got a much bigger marine protected area.
We started to monitor the area ourselves with scientists. It was quite obvious in these areas that previously had been dredged and trawled away that the seabed was springing back to life. The shellfish diving sector and the creel sector have been very supportive.
It gives this place an absolute rest. It's had an absolute doing from inshore fishing. It's only beneficial to the creeling industry.
You need lots of other people all around about you to encourage you to persevere. It's a real team effort.
The group is really good to be in. If you go to a meeting, it's really enjoyable. You get through stuff, but it's still a nice way to spend an evening.
Bringing the community on board, it doesn't happen overnight. It's many months, many years. The problem with conservation in the sea is, to most people, it's like out of sight, out of mind. If you can't see it, why would you want to protect it?
We are up from Ullapool a few years ago. A few of us decided that we wanted to see better protection for the area, and it wasn't good what was happening.
There are many people that feel exactly the same way that Coast feel.
We looked at these guys, they were ahead of what we were looking at doing, and it's been helpful and very inspirational.
It's very important, the collaboration we have with other communities which are growing. Not everything's not been successful, you know, we've had our failures along the way, and it's important that that is disseminated so that the kind of path for these other communities is a shorter and much more straightforward one.
So remember to look under the seaweed as well, guys, okay? Every week children come over from the mainland and do a residential course. Here we're right on the edge of the no-take zone, so it's really topical. We've just described to them in the class what the no-take zone's about. So we bring them out, let them look in the shore and just have a look at the animals that they can find in the rock pools. It opens their eyes to something they wouldn't otherwise necessarily get the chance to see, from little crabs to shellfish. These cool things are here. We need to protect them for them to be about when these kids are older, and if they have kids, for these animals and the habitats to be around for them when they're older.
So there's a little note of optimism. The Scottish Government has taken on board the public pressure and its responsibilities that it had and has chosen to keep on as a result of European legislation. The Scottish Government has adopted a lot of that stuff into its own rules and laws, and it's designated a huge number of marine protected areas, inshore and offshore. Some of them are enormously large. The problem is that having done that, we have a whole series of paper parks. A lot of them have no management plan at all in place yet, and approximately 5% of the marine protected areas are actually protected from high impact fisheries like trawling and dredging. We need the other 95% protecting, and going back to the 3 mile limit, or a limit being restored, that automatically cover a huge number of marine protected areas, enable the sea to recover. But that's about it from me, apart from saying that with the backing and help of our communities and a few determined people, we can influence the decision makers in government and government agencies at all levels, and we can get them to protect and restore the country's natural environment, not just the sea. We just have to bring the rest of the community on board, show them the possibilities, allow nature to take its course, and demonstrate to government that this benefits everybody. So thank you.